I'm Father Michael Orsi. I'm your host for Action for Life Television, that good news program which brings you the big G, the gospel of Jesus Christ, and all the good things, the little g, that people are doing to put that gospel of life into action. Today we have a very serious conversation that we're going to present to you with a man named Mr. John Long. And he is someone who is involved with a group called the U.S. Institute Against Human Trafficking, and he is the director of major programs. We here in Florida are suffering a great deal from human trafficking. Oftentimes, people are not aware of what's going on, who the victims are, what to look for, and I suppose sometimes we feel helpless insofar as how do we end this tragedy, this abuse of human beings. We are now going to bring in our special guest, Mr. John Long of the U.S. Institute Against Human Trafficking. Welcome, 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 John. It's so nice to have you with us today, although I don't like discussing this topic, but I suppose we have to discuss it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us. And it's a horrific thing to think that something like the U.S. Institute Against Human Trafficking had to be developed. And our prayer and our hope is that we can help end human trafficking. And it's through things like this and education and making people aware of what the victim looks like and what the typical buyer is looking for.
It's like buying a commodity, a buyer. All right, let's talk about human trafficking, the people that are involved. First, the victims. Who are the victims?
Well, like you said, the victim spreads across the continuum of humans. We deal with everything from adult females to minor females and even the minor boy. And it typically, the boy is something that gets forgotten, gets unidentified, and is very underserved victim of human trafficking because we don't typically think of the boy. And also we have that glorified kind of Hollywood idea of what trafficking is, and Hollywood has made the movies like Taken that glorifies or exaggerates what trafficking is. And we often think it happens internationally, but the reality is it is happening in our backyards. It's happening in big cities, little cities, rural cities. It's happening throughout the country. In fact, it's estimated that somewhere between 100,000 and 300,000 kids are sold for sex every year just in the United States.
How do they get involved with this despicable behavior?
Well, there's a plethora of different ways, but we do know that there are some commonalities, a lack of family structure, a lack of cultural support, a lack of education, people that are living on the street. In fact, they say that the statistics are, but when a kid goes on the street as a runaway kid, within 24 to 48 hours, that kid is approached to do some kind of act for money. And so it covers, successful, unsuccessful. It covers every minorities. It covers a gamut of different people, and there's no commonality. We can't just say this happens only to females, only to minority females. It happens all over in every community. So for females, it's estimated that around 13 years old is the first time they get involved in sex trafficking. For boys, it's about 11 years old.
What do we call the people that find these children on the streets?
We typically refer to them just as the buyer. We like to call, culturally, they're typically referred to as Johns, but that takes away from the reality of who's buying it. My name is John. John is a very common name. It doesn't give the specifics of who's buying it. So these are buyers that we want to put a name to. We don't want them to be able to go undercover. We don't want them to be unknown. We want to expose that about 20% of men in the United States at some point in their life will pay for sex. Well, they're professionals. They know what to look for. They know the vulnerability of some of these kids, and they meet the needs that the kids have. So if a kid doesn't have a family structure, doesn't have a father or a mother that loves them and cares for them, these people come in and woo them. and they convince them that they're good people. They love them. They provide housing. They provide food. They buy them gifts. They give them clothes. They meet that basic need of being wanted and being loved, and then they provide for them. So the kids are kind of duped into becoming part of this life. And it's not just the kids, even the adult females have the same story, where it's a grooming process. And they find these people that are selling humans, find the vulnerability, meet the need, and then at some point they make a switch and they say, I've done all of this for you. Now here's what you have to do for me. They're groomed. They are wooed. They're won over. It's kind of like Romeo Juliet kind of idea. They fall in love and they feel wanted. They feel valued. They feel like they have a place. And so they are duped. And people are professionals at making this happen. In fact, human trafficking is the second largest criminal activity, only behind drugs. And we know that as it continues to rise, human trafficking will eventually take over the drug sales, because when you sell drugs, there's a high risk of getting caught. If I sell a pound or a kilo of something, I've got to go find more. But if I'm selling human beings, typically a woman is sold between 10 and 15 times every day.
How do they determine the price?
Well, it's based on, typically it's the market, it's the demand. And so if it depends on the location, depends on the city, can have an effect on how much things cost. The person who is participating in the sexual act is quoted a price. It's non-negotiable typically. And the pimp or the person who is trafficking gets the money and will give a cut to the individual who performed the act. It's typically a very small percentage. But the buyer, and it's an organized crime. It's very detailed. It's very organized. And there's people out there that are doing it throughout our country. The girls are brought into this life, but they're not allowed to leave the life. And so these bosses, these people that are running the show, hold these girls accountable. Typically too, with the kids, it's organized very similar way. However, we're finding that the kids that we come in contact with are their own pimp. So they are a smaller organization. They take care of themselves as far as selling and finding people who pay for them.
The kids negotiate this themselves?
There are kids that are using dating websites, the internet, to put themselves out there, to meet men who will pay to have sex with them. And they don't hide who they are. They don't portray to be somebody over the age of 18. They are very honest with who they are, what they're willing to do, and how much it will cost.
Well, you're talking to me about some people who are rather intelligent. If they can navigate the web and they can set a price and they can set a meeting place, they have quite a degree of intelligence. And it almost seems as if they become part of the organization.
Yeah, and the kids that we come in contact with, they get so involved in this kind of lifestyle that they feel like they can't get out. They get so involved with selling themselves. They come from very broken places. They come from typically broken families or people that just don't value or love them. And so they're not necessarily selling themselves for money. They're selling themselves and finding people who will make them feel, even though it's unhealthy, but make them feel like they're wanted.
I am amazed. I had no idea that they were actually involved in, selling themselves. Okay, you have little ones, you said girls, 13 years old, whatever the case may be. Then you have adults. Now, how do the adults differ from the children? Certainly by, their age. But what else? What's different? How does an adult get involved with this?
Well, it's very similar. They're groomed as well. The adults, again, are coming from a very broken place, who they may get involved in with a relationship with a man who they think is their man, but little do they know that there's ulterior motives typically. And again, that man will meet the need that the woman presents with, give them a place to stay, take care of their nails and their hair, make them feel like they're loved, groom them through this process. And then at some point, again, they'll switch and say, this is what I've done for you for the last 6 months. Now here's what you're going to do for me. And the typical question we get, why doesn't the girl just run away? Well, it's not that easy. This is a crime. This is an organized crime. And so if the woman says, I'm not doing that, there's typically beatings that come with it. There's physical abuse, mental abuse, sexual abuse. A woman can't just run away. There's safe houses for women throughout our country, and they have to be very undisclosed and very protected, because even when a woman enters a safe house, still there's men that are pursuing her, trying to get her back into the life, because she's not a woman, she's property, and she was making them money. And so that she has to stay in that life, or there's some severe consequences.
Okay. We get a bit of an understanding now of what's going on right here in our own country, where, as I said, the child runs away and then they get involved, with the organization, become part of it in some cases, selling themselves, using the internet to make contacts with men, or could be women too, correct?
There are some women that do pay for sex. We know the majority, and I think it's estimated that 90% of buyers are men, but there are some women that do participate as well.
Okay. What about, we hear sometimes about coyotes bringing people over from different countries. And how does that work?
It's another form of trafficking. And so you go to another country, you get a group of very, very vulnerable individuals, make a plethora of false promises, get them into the country. And once you've removed them from what they've known, their culture, their nation, and you bring them to the United States, they don't have resources. They don't have anybody to call. So they're kind of a captive individual that then is forced to do things, either labor or sex. They're forced to be in this life with the threat, if you don't do it, then we're going to go back to the country and kill your family. We're going to turn you over to the police because you're an illegal. And so there's a lot of money. And again, it's a large business to bring those people over into our country and then sell them because they don't have any resources.
As you can imagine, producing this wonderful program, Action for Life, it costs a great deal of money. We're going to need your help. So if you would like to donate to keep this good news program on the air, please go to your computer, your cell phone, actionforlife.net. Thought for the day. Our country is going through a tumultuous time. Many people are questioning the very foundations upon which this country has been built. One of the foundations that people are often forgetting is that this country was built on biblical principles, on justice and righteousness, and also upon charity. So much so that our founders had engraved on top of the rotunda of our Capitol in Washington the words of the prophet Micah. Remember, man, do what is right, love justice, and walk humbly with your God.
The United States is the #1 buyer of human trafficking.
So we're the buyers, and who are the sellers from abroad?
Asia is a large population that has a big population of individuals that are sellers.
Okay, now how do they bring these people into the country from foreign countries?
Well, it's a lengthy process and often a very expensive process. They'll find a way possibly to get them to Mexico, which is an easier way to sneak them over. There's a lot of transportation via boats, but they bring them kind of step by step. They don't just hop into a plane. They don't get on a Delta plane and fly over here. It is a long process with multiple steps to get somebody back into the United States and then start the process of selling them.
Now, are drugs involved with this?
Absolutely. Survivors that we come in contact with have told us that they were often drugged so that they could be transported from one state to the next state. And that's how they were sold, you know, typically all their life or most of their life. You know, we have a family that we've dealt with who was moved from state to state. It was a mother and a child who was being sold by the father, and they would be drugged in the evening. They would get in the car, they would drive to another state, and it was a way to keep the mother and the child unsure of where they were, make sure that they couldn't make friends, and a way to get a new customer.
Would they, though, be giving them drugs as a payment? I mean, to keep them involved with the sex trafficking. Okay, we'll make a drug addict out of you. You need us now. I'm going to give you a shot of heroin.
Yeah, and yes, they use drugs as a way to have the individual continue to live in the life, and then they become addicted to these drugs, and they long for these drugs, and it's a way to numb the pain of being sold for sex on a daily basis multiple times. And so they do, a lot of the survivors that we deal with have a high substance abuse history.
We talked a little bit earlier, I believe, about boys. Now, quite honestly, I've never thought about boys being involved in sex trafficking. But I suppose I should be thinking about it because there are people who have certain perversions who would be attracted to boys. Could you talk a little bit about, what's the situation with the males? How many do we have compared to the females? What happens with them?
So nationally, it's estimated that somewhere between 36 and 50% of minors nationally that are sold for sex are boys. So it's a wide range there, and that's because the data doesn't always work well together. They don't communicate very well. So let's just say 36% of the minors sold in Florida are boys. Here in the state of Florida, 14.5% of minors that are sold for sex are boys. And so when you start peeling back those numbers and you look to see what that is, it's somewhere between 80 and 100 boys every year just in the state of Florida that are sold for sex.
Okay, a boy then begins to grow up. Then what happens to him?
Well, if they don't receive the services and the help that they need, their lifestyle continues. We fail at allowing the boy to be the victim. We do a bad job of identifying the boy. We often want men to be men. We don't want men to be sensitive. We don't want men to be able to share their problems. And we often compare it to the education system. When a male teacher has sex with a female student, everyone loses their mind. Everyone says the guy should go to jail, he should be put to death. But when a female teacher has sex with a male student, we often congratulate that boy. We often tell him, well done. We say boys will be boys. We say he should be proud he's having sex. And so when a boy gets involved in this life, it's really hard for the boy to come out of the life because there's a lack of resources. There's a lack of people that are willing to allow him to share. There's some guilt. There's a shame. And so we need to create a culture that allows the boy to be the victim and allows the boy to share his story. The number one thing we can do is we can educate ourselves, and then we educate our communities. And on our website, the U.S. Institute Against Human Trafficking.org, there are multiple trainings on how to identify a victim of human trafficking. There's Human Trafficking 101. There's videos for medical professionals, teachers. There's education for law enforcement. So the number one thing we can do to reduce the demand for trafficking is to educate our communities. We want the buyers of sex to feel like everyone knows what they're doing. We want them to feel like the world is closing in on them. We need churches to rise up and say, we're not going to allow this to happen, to provide some education, some awareness of what's going on. But until we can educate our communities, we're never going to defeat human trafficking.
Okay, well, anyway, so you're making us aware of something now. All of our audience is watching you. We're becoming aware of a real major problem. How do we, this viewing audience for Action for Life, how do we begin, can we identify a person, a girl, a boy, a woman who is in trouble. Where are they? How do we spot them?
Well, again, if you go to our website, there's an opportunity. It's called the Abolitionist Program. There's trainings for individuals to get involved, to get educated, and to learn how to identify. But not only learn how to identify, but we also have to know what to do once we've identified. And so we have steps on there of what to do.
Tell us some of the steps, because some folks are going to say, well, give me some steps right now.
Okay. If you think someone is a victim of human trafficking, calling the National Human Trafficking Hotline is step number one. Allow the professionals to be aware of what you think is going on.
Okay. How do you spot that, though? You say, I think this is going on. Why would I think that?
If you see a woman who is with a man who's not allowed to talk, the man always talks for her. The man is always in control of the money. The woman presents with maybe some physical abuse or some physical harm to her. The woman is dressed inappropriately for the weather, because typically these victims are being moved around. They don't have their own things. And so it may be cold outside, but this individual is dressed in a way that is inappropriate. So these are some small red flags. With the kids, kids that are overactive on the internet, kids that are spending a lot of time on these websites that are inappropriate, kids that have no supervision. In fact, we had a kid who was who was groomed online while playing video games, was trafficked for a year in a trailer park with neighbors. And for a year, nobody even knew that kid was in that trailer. And so just being aware of what's going on next door, being aware of what's going on within our communities, and then knowing what to do with that information.
Suppose there's like a house in your neighborhood and you see a lot of people going in and out. Would that be an indication?
Sure. Yep. That's what happened in this trailer park. Okay. People were coming and going for a year and nobody said anything.
Okay. So then
heavy traffic.
Okay. So then I get suspicious. Mm-hmm. Who do I call? The police?
If it's immediate danger, to call 911. Yes.
Okay. But maybe I would know it's immediate danger. I just say, I got a suspicion here. I could call the police, 911. Would they come?
Well, you could still call the police, but the National Human Trafficking Hotline can provide you as the caller with resources. It also will initiate an investigation on your concerns.
When someone gets in touch with you, then what do you do? And then we're going to talk about some of the programs that you have, because I want churches and civic organizations and schools to know what's available out there, okay? So tell us now about when police or you get a call, what do you do?
So we are not an investigation organization. We don't investigate human trafficking. Our goal is to stomp out the demand by educating the community and providing resources to survivors. So once people reach out to us, we do get phone calls from people that are in the lifestyle. And so we'll provide them with resources like the Human Trafficking Hotline, local things that they could reach out to. But it has to be that individual's choice to make that call. If we get a call and there's immediate danger, someone's life is on the line, somebody's being threatened, and then we get law enforcement involved in that. But the U.S. Institute wants to provide, again, education for churches and kind of a push. We have what we call trafficking-free zones. And trafficking-free zones are created by educating communities, educating churches on what to look for, how to identify, and then declaring themselves a trafficking-free zone. So people know it's a safe space. So people know that these people are trained, educated, and they'll know what to do if they come in contact with trafficking. Okay,
so ladies and gentlemen, you hear what John is saying to you. We're going to need you. We're going to need you to help us to end this tragedy, this crime that's being committed against our fellow human beings, especially young girls, women, even we were talking about little boys. So I want you to maybe make it your project, that you're going to introduce this into your school. You're going to go to your pastor and say, can we at least put up some maybe brochures? Can we put something in the church bulletin? What can we do as a community to put an end to this tragedy and to remove these poor people from a modern day slavery, from physical, mental, psychological abuse? Now, John, do you have a phone number and a website that you could tell us about, and that way our folks can get in touch with you?
Yes, our website is usiaht.org. United States Institute Against Human Trafficking.org. On that website, there is a plethora of educational services, resources, ways to get involved. If churches want to rise up and really work at stomping out human trafficking, we walk side by side. We don't just say, here's a pamphlet, go figure it out, but we'll walk hand in hand on how to conduct training, how to rise up leaders within your church, and how to make it really happen. So it's a movement to end human trafficking. We know that there's trafficking going on in churches. We know that there's buyers that are going to church every Sunday. And so we need the church to rise up, to stand up and say, enough is enough. We're going to end human trafficking. We're not going to stand for this anymore, and we're going to get involved.
One last question. Suppose a church wants to have a guest speaker. Do you provide a speakers forum?
Absolutely. On our website, there's a section where you can send us an email, and we will organize with you to have a speaker come on a Sunday morning or on a Wednesday afternoon or whatever it is. We believe in this, and we know we have to be part of it. And we're willing to travel throughout the state. A lot of now is happening virtually, but we have started doing in-person trainings and presentations that we are willing and able to do throughout our state.
Your offices in Florida is in Tampa?
Correct.
And then you have offices throughout the United States, major cities.
We've got some satellite offices throughout the U.S. to help us in some of the major areas.
Well, John, I want to thank you so much. You've been a wonderful, wonderful guest, and I've learned a lot from you, and I really hope that I get a chance to meet you personally someday. I'd love to have you give a presentation right here in Naples.
Absolutely. Let me know when, and I'll be there. Thank you so much.
God bless you, and keep up your good work. I always end the program by saying I'm for action, and I hope you are too. And John, you are. God bless you.
God bless. Thank you.
We would like to thank our generous sponsors for their wonderful support. Thanks for watching. Please join us next time for Action for Life. I'm for action, and I hope you are too. I'm Father Michael Orsi. I am your host for Action for Life Television, that good news program which talks about the gospel of Jesus Christ, the big G and the little g, all the good things that people are doing to put the gospel of life into action. So please join us for the next episode of Action for Life.